Hi, I'm Jen Bernstein. Over the past few months, we've sat down with candidates for this November's election on The Real Story to help you make an informed decision. We're replaying those interviews here on Fox 61 Plus between now and Election Day. We'll have even more interviews, though, with more candidates here on The Real Story. And you can watch Sunday mornings on air on fox61.com and on Fox 61 Plus. Today on The Real Story, a little more than a week to go until Election Day. And one of the races we are closely watching is, of course, the race for governor. And this morning, the governor, Ned Lamont, will join us in studio. He's looking for a second term in the state's top seat. We're sitting down with him one-on-one this morning, our wide-ranging conversation ahead. And on Election Day, you'll be voting in a new election leader. The Secretary of the State position is up for grabs. This week, we're sitting down with Stephanie Thomas, the Democrats' nominee for the job, on what her vision is for Connecticut if elected. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Jen Bernstein. Every 4 years, we elect the office of governor in our state. 4 years ago, Ned Lamont ran against Bob Stefanowski and came out victorious. And from there, he took on major issues of our time: paid family leave, legalizing marijuana, social justice issues. But the biggest challenge he would face couldn't have been predicted when he took office: the COVID-19 pandemic. Governor Ned Lamont facing an unprecedented challenge of navigating a global pandemic with lives on the line. Now, 2 years later, he's running on his record with a rematch against Bob Stefanowski once again. So what does he want to do if he gets elected to another 4 years? Where does he see our state? Let's ask him. Governor Ned Lamont joining us on The Real Story right now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Jen.
Great to have you back in person. I feel like I've interviewed you.
In person, no more Zoom.
I know, a lot of remote interviews with you over the last two years, 2.5 years maybe. So thanks for coming into the studio. So, you know, a lot's happened in the last 4 years. What have you learned about yourself as a leader?
COVID was tough. There was no playbook. There was nothing coming out of Washington, D.C. There was no stockpile of anything. We had to do it on our own. And I learned, I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And I know how to reach out to the people who can give me the very best advice. And Albert Coe and Scott Gottlieb on the health epidemiology side, and Ingenuity, and Scott Dolch from the restaurants on the business side, because I had to think out loud to tell people what we're doing, why we're doing, and how I'm doing everything I can to keep things open, get things open, but we only do it if you can do it safely. What
do you think, I'm going to ask you the opposite of this too, what do you think the best decision you made during the pandemic was? And then on the opposite, when you look back on it, what do you think you would have done differently?
Differently, not waited for the White House to say, oh, the masks are on the way, here they come. I wish I'd gotten on that sooner. Finally, we negotiated with China, and we got millions of masks before most other folks, and that was necessary. I think one thing we did that took a little forethought was the CDC said, okay, we've got the vaccines now. Remember, everybody was chopping at the bit for the vaccine. They said, everybody pre-existing condition, everybody who's an essential worker, everybody. Pretty soon it was impossible to figure out who should be at the front of the line. We said people over the age of 75, then people over the age of 70. That simplified it. We got a lot more people vaccinated. Nobody was end running around the rules, and I think we saved a lot of lives doing it that way.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was a bold move to do that because the CDC was recommending you do it based on health needs, and you went and pivoted and did it based on age. So, you know, on that note, let's talk about vaccines right now and currently what people are thinking. We know that your opponent has made a pledge to make COVID vaccines for school-aged kids not required by schools. You've spoken on this, but clarify for our viewers here where you stand on this position.
He's got a solution looking for a problem. I mean, we never required vaccines for students during the worst of COVID. So certainly today, it's more like flu than polio. So I think we're going to do everything we can to encourage people to get the vaccine and prioritize teachers if we had another big spread going on. But there's no need at all for any more mandates.
So you would say, I mean, he wants you to take a pledge. Are you saying you will not be requiring them, or are you still leaving it open?
Look, if all hell broke loose, I'm not going to make any pledge I can't keep. But look, during the worst of COVID, I didn't mandate vaccines. I don't think there's a need for it now.
In schools particularly, right?
In schools in particular.
And you followed CDC guidance for the most part, except for the instance, you were just talking about where you released it on school or on age-based, the vaccines for people. Daycares require the flu vaccine. So do you see requiring for daycares to have the COVID vaccine?
I don't think so. I think now it's up to each daycare facility. It's up to each, caregiver there. They have the ability to do it. I strongly urge them to do it. But right now, the kids have the ability to keep themselves safer, and so do the caregivers. So I don't see any need for more mandates.
Okay, let's talk about the economy right now, which is what so many people here in the state want to hear about, of course. I have a few economy questions. This one you're going to laugh at. Tolls, are they dead? Are they dead? You think they're going to come up again?
No, we don't need them. Someday, something's going to change because we're going to move to an all-electric fleet, and then the gas tax will not be paying for our roads and bridges. But we're not there, so I think for the foreseeable future, no. Right now, I inherited a transportation fund that was empty. It was running on fumes. The feds were saying, hey, Connecticut, you better get your act together. We're not going to give you any more money to fix roads and bridges. We've got that repaired. We've got some additional money there. I do have a highway user fee on the big tractor-trailer trucks coming through the state.
Sure,
so I think we're well positioned.
What about the gas tax holiday? You all were able to put that in place, bipartisan legislation in the legislature. That's going to end in December. So are you going to extend that? Do you know?
We're looking at that right now. Look, my opponent can say I'm going to eliminate all taxes, all gas, all diesel, all the highway user fee. We'll figure out how to pay for it another day. I'm not in that position. But right now, we're in pretty good standing in our transportation fund. So if I can at least reduce the amount of tax, I think I'd try and do that. Right now, by the way, Jen, we have one of the lowest gasoline prices in the country. That's a good thing. But it's a little like saying I'm the tallest guy in the pygmy colony because there are a lot of gas prices that are up compared to 2 years ago.
Sure. And families are looking at that and they're saying, oh, is this going to skyrocket once again? I mean, add 25 cents to any of the prices that you're looking at, and that's what people would be paying right now if that gas tax holiday ends. So is it something that you're actively looking at for when you all go back? I'm
actively looking at how I can keep that tax reduced as best I can. I can't control what Putin and the Saudis are going to do, and they're playing games with the price of gasoline. There's no question about it. Anything I can do to keep that down, make sure it's more affordable. I'll tell you, I mean, you talked about COVID. For the first 2 years, I looked at our COVID infection numbers every 5 hours. For the last 5 months, I looked at the price of gasoline because that seems to be a template for people's feelings, and I know why.
Sure. You have touted the full rainy day fund that we have. You've talked about how we have a budget surplus. Your opponent, Bob Stefanowski, is criticizing you and saying that you are withholding money that could help people, that you should release more of that to taxpayers. What's your response?
That's the exact same bad policy that most of my predecessors did, spend down the rainy day fund right before an election, and then hope to God we don't have a recession. Remember, Roland handed out the rebates, then a year or so later, he had to raise income taxes. I've got a rainy day fund to make sure I don't have to raise any taxes, I don't have to cut any spending for education. If we have a recession, it's a real possibility.
Well, you've adhered to the spending cap. You haven't spent the rainy day fund, but as you were just kind of alluding to, it looks like we could be entering another recession. We have a lot on our plate right now. Gas prices continue to fluctuate. Inflation is, out of control right now. And we have our pension debt is a whole other beast of its own. So there's a lot of responsibility with your office for the economic health of our state. When you're looking at all of those factors, what do you think needs to be done over the next 4 years with the state?
My priorities are, A, make Connecticut the most family-friendly state in the country. And I say that, A, to give babies and kids the very best head start in life. That's what paid family and medical leave. That means the big expansion of daycare and childcare. It's also about getting people back to work. You want to deal with inflation, make it easier for people to get back to work, and then we have less of a supply chain problem when it comes to labor, which is jacking up prices a little bit. You mentioned the unfunded pension liability. Look, the last 40 governors have sort of said, I'll put it on the credit card, let somebody else take care of it. And I'm not going to let that happen. My opponent would put it on the credit card and let it go for a while more. I think that's wrong. I think, A, it's keeping our commitment to the state employees who showed up every day. And B, Jen, it's going to save us over $400 million a year for the next 25 years, because that's money I don't have to put in to make our pension obligation. I've already reduced that obligation by $5.5 billion. That
$400 million number, though, that kind of can fluctuate too, right? Because it's dependent on the market, it's dependent on retirees, how many people, and we are going to have an influx of people retiring from state government too as well, though, right?
That's true. They're obviously paying down the pension is absolute. That's important. We've gone from, say 35% funded to close to 50% funded. We're by no means there, but we've made real progress on that front.
You were able to, along with the legislature, do a bunch of tax cuts as we were heading into this season from the last legislature. But a lot of them are kind of one-offs. More than half of them are one-offs. And so come this year, when we could be going into a recession, you anticipate at all adding any taxes?
Probably adding any tax cuts, you mean. Look, I don't. When you say one-offs, I wanted to provide immediate relief to people given an 8-9% inflationary environment. I can't control inflation, which is a worldwide phenomenon, but I can make life a little bit easier for middle-class folks right here in our state. So that's why we did the gas tax. That's why we did the child tax rebate. So money came to you, $250, $500 right before your kids are going back to school. That's why we eliminated the income tax for seniors on their pensions and 401ks. If you're on a fixed income, make life a little more livable. And earned income tax credit, I want people to get back to work, and I want them to keep more of what they earn. So people earning less than $50,000 or $60,000, we've eliminated the income tax for them. So I'm going to keep all that going as best I can.
Yeah, and what I meant by that is, since we're entering the recession, I know you haven't touched the rainy day fund, et cetera, but we could see the legislature trying to implement taxes for some reason in the near future if we get into another bad financial situation. Would you anticipate supporting any of those?
No, I'm proud of the fact that we did not raise tax rates at all when confronted with $2 billion deficits as far as the eye could see. This is 4 years ago what I inherited. Mm-hmm. And I tell anybody in the legislature, if you're contemplating tax increases, say it now before the election. Don't come into my office afterwards.
Okay, interesting. Moving forward, the police accountability bill is another big one. Your opponent has taken a look at 3 areas that he would like to revisit the police accountability law on. I remember hearing from you that you felt like that law needed to be tweaked. So when you're looking at that, is there anything specific that you would go back this coming session and look at?
Well, first of all, remember the context. We just passed a bipartisan crime bill that made sure that people are held accountable. Judges know whether that kid has a long rap sheet or a short rap sheet. More judges, that means we can have faster justice going forward. We also have the police accountability bill. A lot of good things there as well. If there have to be any fine-tuning, so be it. I know people are concerned about the accountability part. There's not been one suit brought under that piece. That's because there's a very, very high bar. And I think, Jen, just like the body cams, it's going to remind people how great our police are. You saw what happened with the tragic murder of the cops in Bristol, and you had the Inspector General immediately say that other cop did the right thing by taking out that bad guy. And you got to see the video. Shocking as it was, it reminded people how great our police force is. Okay, if you get re-elected for the next 4 years, what's the first thing that you're going to do in office? What would be your first priority? My biggest priority is workforce, getting people back to work. It's an opportunity, regardless of background, regardless of zip code. I've got a job for you, and I'm going to make sure I fill those jobs and make sure there's opportunity for everybody. And secondly, with some of the resources we got thanks to our congressional delegation and president, the infrastructure money, I can take 20 minutes off your commute in each direction. And that's a big deal. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take 5, 6, 7 years. I want to make sure with my friend Mark Boughton that money is appropriately invested and makes a difference in people's lives. All right, I'm going to give you the last word here. Your message to voters before Election Day. Don't believe all the negative stuff you see out there. You've gotten to know me pretty well over the last 4 years. You know where my heart is when it comes to the state of Connecticut, and votes really do matter. And I think we're just getting started. I think we showed as a state that we rally together when it comes to COVID. We got through that better than most, more vaccinated, less infected than most, got our schools open, tens of thousands of new families are coming, and we're just getting started.
Governor Ned Lamont, appreciate you coming in studio, as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
All right, today on The Real Story, Republican candidate for governor Bob Stefanowski is in the thick of campaigning, crisscrossing the state, making his pitch to voters. This morning, he's with us. Why Bob Stefanowski thinks this state needs some big changes, a state where a Republican hasn't held Connecticut's top job since 2011. And Bradley International Airport is gearing up for some major renovations, hundreds of millions of dollars aimed at improving and expanding the facilities. The executive director of the Connecticut Airport Authority, Kevin Dillon, joins us in studio this morning. He's going to give us details on the transformational projects, and he'll explain why they're anticipating air travel growth in the coming years to increase. It's all today on The Real Story. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Jen Bernstein. The governor's race is heating up with 1 month to go until Election Day. We are in the final stretch, and that means campaigns are in overdrive right now. I'm sure you know this. It's hard to miss all of those political ads running in every single commercial break, right? Well, Republican candidate for Governor Bob Stefanowski has been gearing up for this rematch. He battled now Governor Ned Lamont almost 4 years ago and did not win, but it was a competitive race. He only lost by around 40,000 votes out of the more than 1 million votes cast. Bob Stefanowski is joining us in studio to give us an update on his campaign and his platform this morning. Good morning to you and welcome.
Hello, Jen. Welcome back.
We haven't had an in-studio interview with you in like years, obviously because of COVID, but welcome back to The Real Story. Glad to have you on.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right, so how are you feeling about your campaign 1 month out from Election Day right now?
I'm feeling terrific. We did a bus tour this week. We hit 30 towns in 3 days, and the feedback is phenomenal. People aren't happy with where Connecticut stands right now. It's too expensive. People are worried about their safety, and parents feel like government has gotten between them and their child. That's not a good thing. Laura Devlin and I, my LG, we've got a plan to fix all three things, and we're looking forward to doing it.
I mean, you've been campaigning for a long time because we had the first race where you campaigned for that, and then even when Governor Lamont was first in office, you didn't remain silent. You continually toured the state, met with leaders, met with faith leaders, I remember down in New Haven.
Yeah.
So you've really built up a base in terms of trying to keep your name out there. How soon did you know that you wanted to run again?
I honestly didn't. People say, well, you knew you were going to run. We really didn't. And my wife, Amy, was as much a part of this as anyone else. But when we did the thing with the masks, and Governor Lamont wasn't able to find surgical masks, and we teamed up with the Jewish Federation in Greater New Haven, we delivered 1.5 million masks across the state of Connecticut when no one else could find them. That just gave us such a sense of gratification, but it also showed us what's going on in the cities. And Democrats have been in control of the cities in Connecticut for 40 years. It hasn't gotten any better. As we continued to think about it, we thought the platform of being governor, we could help people the most. I grew up in New Haven. I'm a product of the public schools. I've been very successful. More people should have the opportunity that I did, and we're going to provide it for people and get the cities on track.
The cities were the tough go during the last election, and they were the same for Tom Foley before you. Obviously, those are Democratic strongholds. How confident are you that you can win those?
I don't need to win. I lost by 40,000 votes last time. What I need to do is pick up more of the cities. And when I go to Bridgeport, I've probably been to Bridgeport 100 times in the last 4 years. What you hear is politicians come once every 4 years, they make a bunch of promises, and then they never see them again. We did a press event at Beisel's Drugstore on Dixville Avenue, where I was born in New Haven. And we had people coming up to us, thanking us that we were there talking to them, thanking us that we had a plan, recognizing that I know what it's like to struggle to make a rent payment or to make a car payment. Governor Lamont doesn't. He inherited $500 million. So they want somebody who understands what they're going through. They want somebody who has a plan to fix it. And most importantly, Jen, they want somebody who cares. And I really do care because I grew up in that environment.
Let's talk about the recent poll numbers. We've seen polls be wrong before. We were talking to a political science professor, though, and he was saying that he had seen 3 recently that were all kind of saying the same thing. How much do you pay attention to polls? Because it does show your race behind, and Governor Lamont up by like some 15 points.
I pay attention to our internal polls, which were spot on last time. This is within the margin of error. It's a low single-digit rate. And let me tell you how I know. Governor Lamont is spending $700,000 a week attacking me on TV. Now, I know he has unlimited money, but if you were up 15 points, would you really be spending $700,000 a week to compete with me? When I go out, it feels different than 2018. 2018, there was a level of frustration that was here. 2022, the level of frustration is here. People are doing things like filling their oil tanks halfway because they can't afford to fill the full tank and still afford groceries. We met a guy in New Haven. He's literally making a decision between feeding his family and buying prescription drugs. Governor Lamont can throw out whatever stats he wants about crime being down and it being affordable, but it's not. And people want to change. They want a different direction. They like the plans that we've rolled out, and that's why I know we're going to win this election.
It is hard because you have an incumbent Democrat in our state. It can be an uphill battle for someone to go against that, right? Especially when there's been a crisis, for example, COVID. People don't always vote change in. What are you telling people out there? Are you trying to convince them that we need the change?
I'm quite candid with them. I say, if you think it's cheaper than it was 4 years ago to live in Connecticut, if you think it's safer than it was 4 years ago, if you think the infrastructure is better than it was 4 years ago, if you think as parents you've got more of an ability over what your kid is taught than you had 4 years ago, then vote for Governor Lamont. But I'm interviewing for the next 30 days to be the CEO of the state of Connecticut. You and the other people out there are going to be my boss. I work for you. I think we need a change. Most of the people out there think we need a change, and that's why I think we're going to win this.
I'm not sure if your internal polls are showing this, but according to the polls that we've been seeing, there's a gender gap. There's a gender divide. I will say that the recent TV ad that you've put on with your family was a pretty brilliant ad, especially if you're seeing that gender gap. It shows, you have 3 daughters. You have your wife who you've been married to for a long time, and it was a humorous ad. What are you saying to women out there who might be on the fence?
Governor Lamont's lying. I hate to call a sitting governor
about what?
A liar. First of all, my position on abortion, it's codified into Connecticut state law, a woman's right to choose. I'm not going to change that law. I believe that a woman should have a right to choose. He's been lying about it, putting $700,000 against it every week. Of course that's going to have input on women. The thing I will say is I do think a parent should know whether their 13-year-old child is contemplating that. I believe in parental notification. Governor Lamont has not come out and said what, if any, limits he would have on abortion. He supported Dick Blumenthal's bill, which would have allowed abortion right up to the point of delivery. So my position is simple. Codified in Connecticut state law. It's allowed in the first trimester unless the health or risk of the baby is at risk. And that's where it's going to stay. I promise people that's where it's going to stay. That's what I'm going to deliver as governor. So take it off the table, Governor.
So you're saying you wouldn't make changes to the law as it stands?
I would not, other than parental notification, which I think we should have.
Will you push parental notification?
We'll see what the legislature comes up with, but most of the people you talk to in Connecticut support the fact that a parent should be involved in that decision. When you need I'm not even talking about consent. When you need parental notification to get a tattoo or your ears pierced and you don't have an abortion, I think that's a bit illogical. I think the governor's kind of extreme on that.
What age are you thinking parental notification would be necessary?
I would think up to 16 would probably be the right number, but we can talk about it. The point right now is there's no ability for a parent to have any insight to what their kid is struggling with. I think they should have it. But you know why Governor Lamont wants to talk about abortion? Because he doesn't want to talk about the economy. He doesn't want to talk about crime that's absolutely out of control. He doesn't want to talk about the curriculum that, in my opinion, should get back to reading, writing, and arithmetic. He knows he loses on all of those issues, so he's picked an issue that's already codified in a Connecticut state law, which is not an issue, and that's what he's trying to do to win the election.
Well, it's certainly an emotional issue, right?
Sure.
And with Roe v. Wade being overturned, especially in a state like Connecticut, it's something that people pay attention to, and it's something that you might see voters vote on that one issue for that because they are concerned. Would you defend a legal challenge to our abortion laws here in Connecticut if something came from out of state, like we're seeing with, the gun law issue?
I will do everything I can to make sure that that law stays in effect as long as I'm governor, period. End of story. Governor Lamont talks about Connecticut values. He shouldn't be scaring the women of Connecticut about my position. We should talk about the real issues in Connecticut, which are affordability, crime, and parental rights.
It's got to be challenging for you because you have the Connecticut Republican, and we've talked about this a lot on our show, can vary and be different from what the National Republican Party is saying. So a lot of Republicans in our state have to kind of really be clear about their views because voters are sitting here saying, worried about what the national conversation is going on. What's that been like this time around for you? I know it's something you battled the first time around with President Trump, and it continues to be an issue. I was waiting for you to say, how long is it going to take you to bring up President Trump? But, what's it been like this time around? How's it been for you?
Well, first of all, I've been very clear on President Trump. Joe Biden won the election. He's the rightfully elected president. If President Trump had anything to do with January 6th, he should be held accountable. But there's a reason I'm not running for Congress or Senator. I want to fix the state of Connecticut. So the issue with respect to abortion, done, codified in Connecticut state law. What am I focused on? The economy, safety, parental rights. That's what I can help. I can help that person who's working 3 jobs, but because the utility costs in Connecticut are the highest in the entire country, we can get those down. We have the 2nd highest taxes in the entire country. We have a plan to get those down. So I think the governor's being a bit disingenuous by not running on the issues that really people of Connecticut care about. That's why I don't really care what the polls say. I know what people are feeling, and what we're talking about is resonating.
Okay, let's talk about your economic plan, because you unveiled it. Was it a $2 billion plan?
Yes.
Including tax cuts?
It'd be about $2,000 per family. It's a mixture of tax cuts and regulating utility companies and getting rid of 200 taxes, which barely collect what they cost to collect. I think it's unconscionable, Jen, that we have a $6 billion surplus. That's not my money as governor. That's not Governor Lamont's money. That's your money. That's the taxpayers' money. And when people are struggling like they are right now, we should give some of it back. Who am I to say we collected $6 billion more than we need, but I'll decide when and where you get it back when you can't afford to go out to eat every week? It's unconscionable he's doing that. And we know why he's doing it, because in order to release it, he'd have to have a special session. He is worried that it's going to get out of control, that he can't control his caucus, and he's worried that it's not going to get elected. That's a pretty sad statement about a sitting governor, that they're putting politics ahead of people.
Under your plan, it doesn't necessarily, any kind of tax cuts, right, or you're giving that money back, doesn't help us with our unfunded liabilities, and our pension debt is what's really kind of drowning our state. What's your plan for the massive amount of pension debt that we're drowning in?
The best way to earn out of that, it's $100 billion. Truth in Accounting came out today and rated us last in the entire country, $62,000 of debt per person. We can pay it down, and we should pay it down, but the way to get out of that is to stimulate the economy. And when you're the only economy like Connecticut is that hasn't recovered the jobs from the Great Recession, that's not a great start. We need to support small business. We need to pay off the unemployment insurance loan. We need to make it easier to do business. We need to invest in our trade schools. There's thousands of jobs that small businesses can't fill right now because we don't have the right skill sets. We need to revitalize our cities so that young people want to stay here. We need to give property tax relief. We've got a plan to cut property taxes so people can buy homes and start to live here like I did. So there's a ton we can do. We have a ton to work with in Connecticut. Great location, great people, great universities. But until you realize and admit you have a problem, Governor Lamont's unwilling to admit we have a problem. Of course we have a problem. And fortunately, we have the money that the federal government sent to us, which, by the way, is our taxpayer money. We have the money to deal with it. For the life of me, Jen, other than politics, I don't know why he's not dealing with it.
What's the #1 thing you're going to do if you're elected? First thing you do?
We're going to cut 200 taxes day one. State of Connecticut has over 300 taxes. There are things like the hypnotist registration fee and the interior design license fee. We're going to stop collecting them day one. That's immediately going to simplify it. It's going to take a lot of the nuisances away. We need to get rid of the tax that Governor Lamont put on food. Why in the world, when you've got 40-year high inflation, would you throw a tax on food? We need to extend the cuts on gases at least through 2023. We need to reverse the increase on the diesel tax. That's inflationary. You tax diesel trucks, they're just going to pass that cost on to consumers. That's inflationary. So there's a lot of things we can do, but in a current situation, when an incumbent refuses to realize that he has an issue, not much is going to get done. That's why we need a new team. That's why we need a different approach. You mentioned it earlier. We've had 12 years of Democratic governor, and we've had 40 years of a Democratic legislature. It's not working. So even if you're not in love with everything I say, why wouldn't we at least try something different? The status quo hasn't worked. I've got a rational plan to do it. It's achievable, and I think it's time to give somebody another shot, and I'm hoping the people of Connecticut, it's risky. I get it. You know the governor. You see him on TV. I know it's risky, but we are not in a good place right now. It's time to try something different. Just give me a chance.
Okay, what do you do from now until Election Day?
Out there every day.
You don't sleep, obviously. You knock on a lot of doors, but
day.
what's your plan? Are there certain parts of the state that you're going to try to hit more?
First bus tour was New Haven County and Hartford County. We need to get up to Litchfield. We're probably going to do another bus tour. Whether it's positive or negative, everything through the press gets spun one way or the other. The attack ads are clearly not accurate. The more I can get out with people. If I have 10 minutes with every voter between now and November, if I did, and Governor Lamont had 10 minutes with every voter between now and November 8th, I'd win by 10 points. I know it sounds arrogant, but I firmly believe it. I'm socially moderate and fiscally conservative. I am not the person that Governor Lamont paints in these attack ads. I will get that out there over the next 30 days. I've got an experience turning companies around. Connecticut is a big Trump company right now. We can turn it around. We just need the chance to do it.
All right, Bob Stefanowski, candidate for governor on the GOP side. Great to have you in studio. Thank you. And we will talk to you once again before Election Day again. We also have, oh yeah, absolutely. I think we have it booked. And we, of course, have reached out to Governor Lamont's campaign, and we are scheduling him to come on The Real Story as well, so you'll always hear both sides. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, you can find more candidate interviews here on Fox 61+. Join us election night for full coverage of all the state races.